revealing what's happening in the school system that especially put her in the sights of the elites.
The elites.
Who've grown tired of being exposed and humiliated by some anonymous account on Twitter.
Teachers? Students? Do you know how underpaid teachers are? It's got to be one of the biggest underpaid jobs for the amount of work they have to do, and one that we always talk with reverence too. It's like, oh yes, they are forming young minds. We really need teachers. What elite power do the teachers have, or the students? This is an account run by a bigot who wants to get people fired from their jobs, and right-wingers love it. It's not threatening existing power structures. Like, the fact that they're reporting on it is because at this point it's grown to the degree that it's newsworthy. This isn't like the way the elites are going to get taken down. It is through an account that falsifies information and calls teachers pedophiles. Alright, hopefully this is one of the final days of the libs of TikTok. Taylor Renz went on Matt Binder. I saw big get for Matt Binder. Good for him. That must have brought him a lot of hate too, because wow, do people hate Taylor Lorenz.
Well, if you've been listening to this...
Wait, canceled by you? Canceled by the conservatives, you mean? I think liberals are like pretty on board with Taylor.
Show for any length of time, you've almost certainly heard me mention the Libs of TikTok account on Twitter. I mention it because that's where I get like 75% of my show prep, but also because...
Wow, that explains so much. Yeah, that makes total sense to me. Matt Walsh doesn't really want to do a lot of work, makes a lot of money, just like spouting hate speech all day, so why not? Just logs on to Libs of TikTok. All right, let's see, we got a pedophile, groomer, pedophile, groomer. All right, that's pretty much a wrap. I got about 75% of my show written now.
As the person running the account is easily among...
The Deacons, have I shown R.M. Brown's video on this? You know I'm a huge fan of his. I'd love to include it in your coverage. Well, I'll watch it on my own time, but I think it would be redundant, right? I'm pretty much going to agree. I'm on board with R.M. Brown. I think he's super based. I will watch it later though.
The top 3 journalists in America. Now, granted, almost all journalists these days are morally bankrupt propagandists, so it's not a very stiff competition. But still, the woman behind the Libs of TikTok account performs a valuable journalistic service. Her primary focus...
Would you Sam Cedar, Glenn, if you got the chance? I'm Brazilian and have journalistic friends. We could try this. Actually, yeah, I would. I would. I think that would be really funny. I mean, I probably shouldn't talk about this out loud live on a stream in front of 500 people right now, because that might give away the game. I'm pretty sure I've got enough hate watchers these days that someone's going to send it to Glenn and be like, don't go on that show. Telemundo? No, apparently the Serfs is waiting to ambush you there. He's got some whole horse costume he's already wearing. He's going to be talking about ivermectin and all this other stuff. Like, I would not do it. He's yeah.
As the Twitter handle suggests, is TikTok. She finds insane leftist drivel on that platform and calls attention to it. And this is important.
So that's a lie. I just want to make this clear, and we need to push back against this because they are lying, and we should all get in the same way. I've told you already, Republicans all do this really good thing in terms of their messaging, where every single one of them will lockstep in something that is completely fabricated. CRT teaches babies to be racist, and then it teaches that concept to preschoolers. Every single person who is gay or trans is a groomer. Disney is just filled with groomers. The Trevor Project is an organization that does grooming. Like, all of that, all lies, 100% lies. But they all get on the same like narrative, and then all of a sudden they're all talking about it, and that's how they form and dominate culture war issues. So the pushback on this is, no, the Libs of TikTok was not an anti-SJW cringe compilation video poster. That is a lie. That is a lie that Republicans have been force-feeding everybody so well that people even on the left have started believing it. And the free speech absolutists have come out and been like, I mean, I know it's mean, I don't agree with it, but like, if they're just going to show videos of a whole bunch of cringy people who happen to be gay and trans, who might have stopped that? And honestly, if that's all it was just like an anti-SJW compilation site, I wouldn't have a beef with it. I think you have a right to be like, this is cringe, because that's what I do. I show you, Matt, this is cringe. This right here, just so everyone knows, this, you see this right here, this is cringe, okay? Matt is very, very cringe. He's incredibly cringe. He's a very cringy human being, okay? This is cringe. And if that was what it was, fine, you know, God bless, go do your thing. But they lie. They tell you that this person is specifically grooming children. both, like everyone who sees that, and a lot of people apparently on the right don't even know what that means. That means they're coercing kids to have sex with them or enter into sexual relationships with them. And so when you see a teacher who's like, hey, by the way, I happen to have come out as trans, and I came out as trans to my students just so they're not confused by the fact that since I've been on hormone therapy, I have a much softer voice. I have long hair now. I just wanted them to be aware that I am in fact a trans woman, and so that's what I'm about. And then when you add at the very top of that, this teacher is grooming kids, as in this teacher is trying to have a sexual relationship with children, then people who see it get really fucking mad, get really angry, and they start to associate those two things in their mind. They start to associate being trans with being a pedophile, being trans with being a groomer, and that is an incredibly dangerous rhetoric. So we all have to push back against it. I mean that just broadly speaking, progressives, leftists, even liberals, sock dems, whoever you are, as long as you are not someone who's actively trying to endanger trans people, trans kids, then everyone should be on the same page. You should understand what Libs of TikTok has done. They have deleted over 2,700 tweets. They're all cataloged on the Wayback Machine. We have links to all of them. Many of them, some of the most egregious ones, the ones where the account would just post sometimes videos of students and then be like, this person has mental illness. This is mental illness personified. Look at the mental illness on display here. And again, those people would receive a whole bunch of hatred directed towards them.
And I imagine rather emotionally exhausting work, not just because the videos she finds are often morbidly hilarious, though they are, but because TikTok is by far the most popular social media app among the younger generations. And by revealing the sorts of things that are posted on TikTok, she's pointing the spotlight into the disturbing and often rather baffling environment where millions of kids are being molded and formed. I mean, social media isn't just an app on a phone. It's where people, especially kids, live. It takes priority over what we would call the real world. But to them, TikTok is a much...
To be fair, the Wayback Machine definitely doesn't have all deleted tweets. They don't, but there's an archive on GitHub that basically has about 2,700 of them, including some of the worst ones. Like the one where she called the Trevor Project a grooming organization. The Trevor Project is an organization that prevents suicide amongst youth who happen to be LGBTQ+. Like there couldn't be a more horrifying statement to make. This organization that prevents kids killing themselves is actively trying to recruit kids for having sex. Like that's a fucking horrendous and false accusation to make, and one that is fucking incredibly incendiary. That's a very damaging statement you just put out there to your 600,000 Twitter followers.
Realer world than anything they encounter in three-dimensional space, and they care more about it. That's why it's important for us to know what's going on there, I would think. Also, sites like TikTok are kind of a far-left staging ground. If you're plugged into that world, you'll have a jump on the new leftist ideas and talking points before they make their way into the mainstream.
So what's basically happening is this phenomenon where obviously when you're discussing issues related to, let's just say gender, for people, and I'm going to include myself, for people who are cis, there's a long learning curve, right? There's a lot of things you have to start wrapping your head around, and you're going to, along the way, probably have to have some ideas change because you've lived your entire life thinking one way, and then you have to actually break yourself out of that mold. And obviously, there's a journey all the way over to, you've seen that meme, I'm sure, all over the internet, the difference of talking to cis people about gender issues versus talking to fellow trans people about gender issues, and like one of them is just nothing, the other one is like the actual hand of God, you know, touching down. Like obviously, there's that gap, right? We're all trying to help bridge that gap. We're all trying to figure out the best way to communicate that as well, because in my heart of hearts, someone who claims to be an ally sometimes, but will stop at a certain point and be like, look, I'm an ally, okay? I'm an ally, but here's just some things. I think that, you know, mutilating children and giving them hormones and all this kind of stuff is child abuse. I'm an ally, okay? I'm just live and let live. I think you should be allowed to be whatever you want to be. It's none of my business, you know, that's it. But I just think if you're going after a kid, right? That gap, we have to figure out how to bridge it. When you see videos on the Libs of TikTok, these are concepts that are much, much further than this sometimes. Not just the ones that the teachers talk about, but they're actually when people are just discussing things related to gender theory. Sometimes they'll be discussing things like what it is to be gender fluid, what it is to be this and that. And to people who not only aren't even like a quarter of the way there, but are actively on the other side of the aisle politically, to them, it all comes across as kind of like magical indoctrination. Like to them, because they don't have any idea what the fuck they're talking about, it's so far beyond the pale because it's something that even people who might already be on board with a lot of these things, they're still trying to wrap their heads around and learn about it. So to them, when they see these videos, it's like, holy shit, look at this. I have no idea what the fuck they're saying, but it sounds like pedophile stuff. What the fuck, you know? And that's how they weaponize this.
This is an extremely fast process. You'll hear some extravagantly pierced, blue-haired weirdo on TikTok spouting the latest insanity, and a week later, it'll be an official Democrat talking point. As the pipeline from leftist extremism to leftist mainstream is not very long at all, but it can be helpful to get the heads up anyway. So for For example, Libs of TikTok posted this yesterday. It's a video from non-binary activist and all-around creep Jeffrey Marsh giving what will soon become the official answer to the what is a woman question. Listen.
Here is Madison Cawthorn's definition of a woman. X chromosomes, no tallywhacker. And this gives me a chance to talk about biological essentialism. First of all, it's not true. People have all kinds of chromosomes and all kinds of bodies. Women who've had hysterectomies, people born with certain conditions, but that's almost immaterial. Number two, it is a system of oppression. Gender is a hierarchy and a system of oppression. And the easier it is to define gender.
And again, if you happen to be pretty well versed in this, you're probably sitting listening to this right now thinking, what has he said so far that is so controversial? Or what have they said? Sorry, I don't know what their pronouns are. But what have they said that is so controversial at this very moment? And why in this moment in time am I watching this thinking that this is like supposed to be something extreme? Because you're very well learned on these topics. You've had these talks before. You've listened to me talk about it. You've listened to Hassan talk about it. You've listened to a ton of other streamers discuss these kind of things before. So at one point or another, you have a lot of information where you're not coming to this out of like, what the ever-loving fuck? What, gender is oppressive? I don't oppress people. What are you talking about actively?
The easier it is to keep the oppression going.
I'm not well versed and I'm wondering what is bad about this. It's scary. It's like all the stereotypes wrapped into the conservative mind right now, right? It's like, well, this is clearly a man wearing lipstick and eyeliner and shit. Like, this is weird to me. What is this? Is this what they call drag? No, this is gender fluid. What are all these concepts? Like, I can't wrap my head around. What? Okay, I'm just going to write "okay groomer" and then tweet it out, and then boom, we'll just leave it at that. And then of course the person is going to be targeted afterwards because a whole bunch of people are going to flood that account right afterwards, being like, "Oh, I saw what you said. I can't believe you would say things like this."
It's dangerous.
Now, by the way, people do not have all kinds of chromosomes. Women have XX chromosomes, men have XY chromosomes. That's the setup. Now, the fact that a very small number of people suffer from genetic or abnormalities or deformities, which in those specific cases may make the chromosomal situation somewhat more muddled, does not change the fact that in principle, men have XY.
Here's the limits of my understanding and my willingness to admit that this is the consensus, broadly speaking, of the scientific community. Now, I'm going to acknowledge that that exists because if I didn't, obviously people could say that's just not factually accurate. But I'm also going to state that it's so rare that it doesn't, in fact, disprove my point. Even though it exists, yes, I admit. And yes, its very existence does disprove my point. But still, even then, I'm just going to say it doesn't happen enough for me to think that I can still not talk about this as if I was correct. That's 100% what he's doing there.
Chromosomes and women have.
And by the way, Ben Shapiro does this too. They've gotten to a point they never used to, right? I don't think they ever used to acknowledge intersex people in the same way they're doing now. But now they're getting to a point where it's just kind of like, you do realize that you're just factually wrong about this. Your information is very dated. So they got to get, like, I guess a little slightly and just be like, well, those are just genetic abnormalities. So it doesn't disprove my point.
XX chromosomes. There was a case in 2006 of a Chinese baby born with a very rare...
Do you think empathizing with fear to an extent might help flip-flop some conservatives on this? An example might be, hey, this is fairly new to you and new stuff can be scary, but let me explain some basics and see whether it'll help with fear. Honestly, it needs to come sometimes in the form of a person like Beau of the Fifth Column or something like that. And I don't mean that in that it has to be someone who speaks in like that specific accent or something, but someone who they would come across as non-threatening to them in any way, shape, or form. You know, something that they may stereotype as this is what a man's supposed to be. I mean, a man has a beard, man has a nice accent, a man works with his hands, a man is a tool, you know, knows how to... I was going to say, a man works with tools, but now a man is a tool. It's just going to be a clip at the end of that. Goomba Master, thank you very much for subscribing. I appreciate it. But anyways, you got a figure like that who's non-threatening. A lot of studies that have looked into de-radicalization have shown that when approached by someone who is not going to be as threatening in that respect, they'll be more open to listening to them. So you get someone like that who then will say things like, hey, by the way, I just want to talk about this idea, and I know it seems pretty scary and fucked up sometimes. I know, like, it just sucks if you try to have this conversation with someone, they just call you a transphobe. Yeah, it sucks. It's happened to me before. I just want to say, you know what? Here's some, and then proceed with very basic information, right? Like, let's just start here. and then we'll move from there. I mean, that could be a pathway forward. What is important ultimately, and I agree with the sentiment, that we do have to find a way to reach conservatives and the right, so that the only people who really feel this way towards trans people and towards trans kids happen to be like people who are like religious orthodox, you know, like people who are like just going to be like, there's nothing that is ever going to change my mind on this. But anyone else who is a moderate, who's a centrist, or even a center-right person, if they can come to the terms that sometimes you'll get from libertarians. Like libertarians sometimes give you that, like, you know what, if you want to be trans, that's cool. I mean, whatever, I don't really understand it, but you're an adult, so I'm not gonna, like, you know, you do what you want. Adults should be free to do what they want. You got to bridge that gap, get there, so that they are not going to do things like pass all the legislation that conservatives are trying to do that go directly against trans people, because they've weaponized this into the culture war, and they've done it so well.
Birth defect that gave him 3 arms. But this medical anomaly does not invalidate the principle that human beings have 2 arms. If somebody asked you, how many arms do human beings have, it would be insane to act like the question is unanswerable just because the one kid in China had 3. Okay. But the real point for Marsh is the second thing he mentioned, where, you know, and I think we're going to start hearing this a lot more. And he says the question itself is oppressive, even dangerous, because gender is a system of oppression. The thing about that is, you know, if gender is a system of oppression, then why aren't we getting rid of it and just going back to talking about sex, male and female? Why isn't he advocating that we see ourselves simply as male and female, and within those categories, people can dress however they want and be as feminine or masculine?
I don't know if the person in question happens to be a gender abolitionist, but the idea would be that in modern society, there are people who experience dysphoria and they want to identify as a different gender. They may want to identify as a man, and part of that process with both their presentation and whatever kind of things they're doing in order to transition may help remove their gender dysphoria along the way. So it could be beneficial in that case to have the idea of a man and a woman. It just doesn't have to stop, right? You can also be non-binary, you know, you can also, like, that's the whole point. Unless, again, you're trying to be a gender unless you're trying to abolish gender, basically.
As they want. Wouldn't that be the way to break down the oppressive gender system?
Have you tried Drunk Matt? No, we've never. I don't watch a lot of Matt Walsh because I find him kind of boring. He's not. He's definitely nowhere near as theatrical as people like Haas, for example. He's like just as nasty bigoted as Steven Crowder in that category kind of thing. Let's try.
Leftist radicals are the ones who...
Oh, that's good. Oh, you can already hear it. Oh, that's good. That's good.
Invented it anyway. They came up with the idea that gender is distinct from sex. Why did they invent?
This one really comes across as like a guy on the bus who you don't want to have a conversation with, but you happen to be sitting directly across from.
Then if it's oppressive. And why do men insist on being seen as women and women as men if the whole thing is oppressive? None of this makes any sense.
Yeah, because you don't understand these concepts. That's it, right? So when someone discusses about how it is oppressive, they're most likely referring to how we live in a patriarchal society in which most of the people in control and power, who have the most capital and the most power in political positions, CEOs, etc., of the biggest companies in the world, happen to be men. Most of them happen to be cis men. That is just the way the hierarchy is structured. And also part of that same hierarchy is that we have all of these social expectations that can sometimes be damaging to men as well. It's actually not healthy for men to think that they have to be super strong robots that don't show any emotion and are these caregivers at all time. That's actually very damaging to men and has a lot of negative effects and consequences. So in many ways, the patriarchy hurts all genders. It's an oppressive system that should not exist. We should not favor one gender over another is the idea. We should not prioritize one gender over another, both in societal expectation, both in the way we might have more respect for people. There's tons of ways in which people are treated completely differently simply because of their gender, including men completely. So patriarchy sucks, unhealthy, not great. That's the whole idea.
Of course, but it's where leftist discourse is headed, and it's why these videos are important. Of course, Libs of TikTok has done more than post TikTok videos online, though. She also has, especially in recent months, had a hand in breaking major stories about the grooming and indoctrinating going on in our school system.
See, and there's the line. That's the line, because grooming, again, by definition, and again, I don't think most conservatives understand when they use it, what it actually means, coercing a child into having a sexual relationship with you. That is not what teachers are doing when they try to teach or talk about issues related to gender or sexuality. Sexuality is different than sex. You got to understand that one as well. It's very different if you talk to someone and you're like, hey, by the way, some people have two mummies, some people have two daddies, because that is the way their sexuality is oriented. And they're like, okay, I understand. Versus, hey, here's how you do the pile driver, and I'm going to teach you those techniques right now. You understand there's a difference between what I've just said. Those are two different things, are different. You just haven't learned what it is. You just hear the word, it's got sex in it, and because you hear the word sex in it, you're like, well yeah, you want to teach kids about sex. No, I would assume and hope no one has any interest in doing that.
System. And I suspect it's this last thing, you know, revealing what's happening in the school system, that especially put her in the sights of the elites.
Ah, the elites.
Who've grown tired of being exposed and humiliated by some anonymous account on Twitter.
Teachers? Students, do you know how underpaid teachers are? Like, it's got to be one of the biggest underpaid jobs for the amount of work they have to do, and one that we always talk with reverence too. It's like, oh yes, they are forming young minds. We really need teachers. What elite power do the teachers have? Or the students? What the fuck are you talking about? I know this was the narrative that Glenn Greenwald was pushing too. He was like, yeah, of course, once it got to the point where the Washington Post, which is owned by Amazon, one of the largest and richest companies run by the world's richest human, once they got this story, it's because it threatens power and power structures. This is an account run by a bigot who wants to get people fired from their jobs, and right-wingers love it. It's not threatening existing power structures. Like, the fact that they're reporting on it is because at this point it's grown to the degree that it's newsworthy. This isn't like the way the elites are going to get taken down. It is through an account that falsifies information and calls teachers pedophiles.
And that's why they've now made sure that the account is no longer anonymous.
Well, actually, the owner of the account made sure of that when they publicly published their legal name in the domain registry, which again is public information. And then, of course, we move to Taylor Lorenz crying. Good times. Matt is the living meme of this.
I went through this academy. Every cadet was the right weight, the right height, the right color, and they all had Johnson's Lassard. Every single one of them.
Johnson's?
You know.
Oh, yes.
That's an old reference. Police Academy. Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form. Available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback, because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free. Just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Just, we are prepared to conduct many a human sacrifices in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your humble yet incompetent jesters, trying in vain to bring some levity into your life. To our Lord Trevor R., we give you thanks for this meager plot of land for us to toil away our pathetic existence. To our brave knights, Carl Wauer, Tony, D.M. Rivera, Resident Scarecrow, Sir Nickus, Mayred, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruben Kelly, Brandon, Words Greenwood, Nate, Hegbert Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariane McCarthy, Daniel Sutton, Coulter Smith, Jenna Tal, Quiet 185, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, The Tim Caucus, Multimondi, Trevor Janis, Lemmy 101, Anthropophojak, Saren 42, Catherine, Ramon Acosta, Incosin, Agent NDN, Violent Orchard, Political Puppy, Andreas Chiringuito, Zach Christensen, Todd Buckingham, and Todd Lajeunesse. We salute our mighty heroes off to conquest some bread in some far-off land.